Even as corporates globally are seeing unbridled digital optimism to make their companies future ready, the concerns on cybersecurity are also taking center stage. Nearly 40% of World Economic Forum leaders have cited cybersecurity as a clear and present danger to the global economy. So how does one change the lens on security? How does one ensure that risk-taking is not hampered, but rather encouraged by those managing risk in the new digital reality, with a clear focus on innovation? We speak to Vishal Salvi, Senior Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer, and Head of the Cybersecurity Practice at Infosys. We also have with us Pete Boden, General Manager, Microsoft Digital Security and Risk Engineering. All this to get a view on how to make companies risk-ready as well as future-ready. Well, Vishal, let me just start with you. Now, by almost any measure, it appears that the sort of risk that we are seeing, the breadth, the depth, the impact of possible data breaches, attempts to crack into systems, seem to have increased during the pandemic. Would you agree with that? And if you could maybe take us through some of the new risks that have emerged and how you think organizations are navigating their way through it. Have the risks become worse during the pandemic?
Well, Vikram, the number of incidents and the cybersecurity breaches were always on the rise before the pandemic, right? So we've been seeing year-on-year increase in the intensity and the frequency of the attacks. What pandemic has done is that organizations had to really pivot to working from home, to orchestrate to the cloud, and that created a sense of temporary vulnerability with the organizations who were going through this rapid and massive change. And that, in a way, became an opportunity for the threat actors to start really exploiting. And therefore, we saw an additional amplified, accelerated attempts which were made. Initially, we saw a lot of pandemic-related campaigns on phishing and other things which were happening on the rise, but they have been unrelenting. They have been constantly making sure that they are using various techniques and methods to really intensify these attacks. And so therefore, I'll agree that pandemic actually created a bigger opportunity for the threat actors, and we saw a rise for something which was already on the rise. And so we saw the advanced malware, the ransomware attacks, and various versions of ransomware attacks. The cybercrime was always on the rise, and we have seen that continue, in the financial segments, and also the advanced persistent threats, right? And whether it is nation state or organized crime, all of that has been on the rise, and so it's been pretty busy for us in cybersecurity world.
Okay, Pete, weigh in on the new mode of work, the hybrid realities we have now, and the challenges and the opportunities that they bring. I mean, take Microsoft itself. You have Microsoft's a network of more than 100,000 talented people spread over more than 100 countries. So how do you ensure that that global workforce continues to stay productive, to innovate, and yet manage the security challenges of remote work?
Well, first of all, thank you, Vikram, for having me. It's great to be here. I think as we think about this new mode of work, we're certainly not going back to the old way before the pandemic. We're going to have people working from any location on many different types of devices doing all kinds of work. So our security controls environment needs to continue to evolve to meet those needs. One of the things that we've found incredibly helpful is to measure both productivity and security as we roll out more of these hybrid and remote-ready security controls. So we are really looking carefully at the productivity of our workforce and how that's impacted by some of the changes we're making, and we're adjusting as we go forward using those measures.
Turning back to you, Vishal, the pandemic has also made virtually every company on the planet realize that digital is here to stay, digital is the future. We've got to keep on investing more, being more innovative, continuing to advance on everything that we're doing on digital. So when you're talking to clients, they must be wanting to innovate, wanting to continue to be digital, and then saying, all right, that's fine. But while doing that, how do we ensure that everything is still safe? Is that what you're hearing from your clients?
I mean, that is clearly reality, because we are seeing a significant amount of digital innovation, digital adoption. In fact, any organization today or enterprise today not having a digital strategy is not really innovating, right? And so when you talk about it from that context, what we see is that from a cybersecurity world, the attack threat surface increases dramatically. Because we're talking about a rapid adoption of technology, adoption of cloud, adoption of data and analytics around that. And so what was something which you could manage within the perimeter of your organization, today it can be anywhere around the internet world, which is borderless and which does not believe in any geographical controls. So all of that is clearly creating a different set of risk perception and risk threats for the organization to manage. So while we're talking about innovation, there's a need to look at how do we secure that innovation in future.
Till now, it's often happened that companies almost thought about security as an afterthought. But if I can take a parable from, the Formula One world, sometimes it happens that if you have really powerful brakes that are in a car, it enables you to accelerate faster because you can then keep control. So Vishal, if you take that as an example, if you're building in really tight security from the very beginning, it might actually enable a company to go faster because they know that they have the brakes that can help keep things in control if really required. So perhaps it's critical to build security right from the outset rather than bolting it on later.
I mean, that's a great example, great analogy, right? You want to go fast, you need to really have strong brakes in your car to get a sense of control, right? And so, the stronger the engine, the stronger the brakes, right? Now, when you talk about all of this and then you apply that to any risk management function, and cybersecurity is a risk management function, I think it's very important for you to then translate that into cyber world as well. And so it becomes important that it should not be an afterthought, because if it is an afterthought, it's very, very expensive to implement security after you build the solution. Imagine trying to put a brake in a car after all your design is complete. It's just impossible. So same thing applies to technology. It's just that it becomes very difficult to imagine that in a software world. And therefore, at times, you tend to ignore and not implement it. And so democratizing security and making security by design is a very important aspect of making sure that you are securing the digital, and all the changes which are happening in the organization.
Pete, what would be your take on that? I mean, the importance of keeping cybersecurity as a priority and the prominence of it to be integrated and not bolted on as an afterthought. At the end of the day, let's say you're protecting a network perimeter, thousands of global endpoints accessing corporate data and services 24 hours a day. How do you safeguard corporate resources around the clock and at all times?
Absolutely right. As we say, it needs to be built in, not bolted on. As you said, I think there's a couple of other key elements to this as well. One is that we have to be able to evaluate and assess the effectiveness of our security along the full stage, all the stages of the development lifecycle, whether that's building a product or setting up an operations infrastructure, whatever it may be. We've got to be able to measure as we go. And then I think the third thing I would say is we have to make security a cultural priority for everybody at the company. Everybody is involved in protecting Microsoft's intellectual property, sensitive data, and we have to be able to imbue that cultural priority with security right from the top of the organization all the way through.
Let me just ask you, Vishal, for some specifics for where people are concerned. If you're looking at just about any study that is being done, Gartner, for example, 9 and 10 board members are now saying that cybersecurity is a very major business risk. So what would be your major agenda items? What would you tell them? What are the 1, 2, 3 things that you should keep in mind as a company?
Yeah, I mean, every board is right now worried and concerned, and rightly so, because not just that the risks are growing, but also, overall the ecosystem and the company ecosystems are making them, as well as the leadership, accountable for how do you really manage cybersecurity risks, right? So it starts from the top, and you need to set the tone in terms of really what do you want to do and how do you want to drive your strategy and how do you want to drive your program when it comes to implementing cybersecurity within the organization. And there are really 4 goals that you need to set for yourself, right? One is in terms of how do you really do the trade-offs or the balance between convenience and control. so that you're able to make sure you're constantly going with the equilibrium, right? So that's number one. Number two is how do you constantly improve the cybersecurity posture of your organization? You're not really competing with your peers or the industry. You're really competing with yourself. How are we ensuring that you're better than what you were yesterday? Number three, how do you build a sense of cyber resiliency within the organization? So the attacks will happen, the breaches will happen. How do you go in a composed, calm manner to really manage those instances and recover from that and resume your business quickly? And the fourth, but very important, how do you build a cybersecurity culture, right? So at a strategy level, these are the four core goals that you need to really set yourself for as a leadership team. But then after that, it's all about really as an ecosystem, how do you build and engineer secure by design that we talked about? How do we ensure that you are able to democratize security? Security should not be a problem only of the cybersecurity team or the IT team. It should be the problem for everyone. And everybody needs to incentivize and realize that what is the role that they need to play. If you do all of these things, this problem can be solved.
Okay, Pete, how tough is it to keep pace? I mean, I know Microsoft digital footprint is massive, so I hear you're seeing something like 20 billion cybersecurity events per day. How do you keep up with that?
Yes, this is the challenge of our time now as we look at the ever increasing threat and the volume of threats continuing to rise and the type of threats continuing to evolve. We have started to use our own first-party security incident and event management capability called Azure Sentinel as really the centerpiece of how we think about our security operations center and the signal that we send from across the company. And those signals are vast, from endpoints, from our network, from our identity systems. And as you mentioned, up to 20 billion a day flow into that system. A couple of things are really important there. One is that humans cannot process that type of volume, obviously. And so we're heavily dependent on machines to do the heavy lifting, and we're very dependent on data science techniques to help us filter and help us build pattern recognition within that data set. The results have been fantastic. We see much faster throughput. We're seeing up to 18 times faster throughput through the new Sentinel system. We're able to put new detections in place between 8 and 100 times faster. And then that's all resulted in up to a 22% increase in fidelity, which means that the humans that are on the receiving end of these alerts are getting much higher quality information than they ever had before.
All right, Vishal, one major question, which is perhaps the biggest question on the minds of many business leaders right now. How do you get ready for a return to office? Many people have already come back to office, but what is going to be the future of the workplace? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be back to office fully? Once everyone's vaccinated, more and more people just getting inside there? Or is it still going to be a fair amount of work from home? Go up to the hills, go to a nice beach, work from there. What, to your mind, is going to be the future of work?
So one answer to your question is about how technology is going to enable it. And the other aspect is in terms of how we as employees and corporations are going to drive this, right? And both the things are two different things. I think technology problem is not an issue at all, because today technology is ready to support completely back to office or completely work from home or the hybrid, right? And security can be a very important enabler in that. So that's not a problem at all. I think what we are seeing right now from a corporation's point of view is that we are seeing hybrid and we are seeing where people are returning to physical meetings in a very calibrated manner. But at the same time, there are flexibilities that are required for employees to continue to be working from home to improve their productivity. So I think the future is all about hybrid. And at least one thing which is going to be sure, Vikram, is that we're not going to go back to the old legacy architecture that we had. We're going to have a modern, pivoted, and technology as well as security architecture, which allows you to work from anywhere, anytime, any device, and you will be able to get 24/7 access to whatever you want to work in a very trusted and a secure manner.
So same question to you, Pete. What is the future of work going to look like? Is it going to be back to office? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be work from home? What's Microsoft thinking of doing? You have 100,000 people out there. How are you seeing the future of work at Microsoft? And how do you think continuous innovation can come if you do have a future workplace that is hybrid or partially work from home?
We see more of a mixed mode of work returning as the pandemic eases away, which means that some people will return to the office for some of the time. But really what's going to happen is we're going to be allowing much more flexibility in terms of where people work. And so our security model has to account for that. We've put a priority on the health of the device or the endpoint and telemetry from the cloud service. And so when you take the security model and you make it primarily about those two things, it becomes much less about the networks you're using for transport and the way you gain access to that service. And so that's a helpful way for us to kind of view what's going to happen in the future. The other thing I would say is that we really have to make sure that the controls continue to evolve as we move forward, because the threat environment will continue to evolve.
Pete and Vishal, thank you so much for joining us for this special session. And yes, it's really important for everyone to keep safety and security in mind.
Thank you, Vikram.
Thanks, Vikram. It was a pleasure. Thank you.